Okay. Good to see you anyway, and yeah, nice to chat.
Yeah, thank you for being patient with me.
No worries. Yeah, yeah,
It's been a fun morning for me, so to say the least.
yeah. So what was the What you had a flat tire? You said, right?
Yeah, I was actually taking my daughter to daycare and drove about a mile down the road, and I was like, this doesn't sound right. Had to turn back around, pulled back in the house, and was like, oh, that's probably because my back right tire was completely done.
Oh man, did you have to change it yourself, or
Changed it
yeah?
myself and
You
put the
were
spare
you
on.
were a true man. You
Oh yeah,
changed it yourself. You didn't just.
changed it myself. Took my daughter to daycare, and then now I'm at my mom's house, so I can fire her.
Right. Okay. Cool. But you run the comic shop, right? I mean,
I help write for CBSI, comicbookinvest.com.
right. Okay.
I write articles for them, like the new comic book day stuff. I actually
Okay.
we interviewed Axel, right?
Okay.
Shoot, when was that? It's almost been a year ago that we interviewed Axel, right when AWA and the pandemic just hit, and he was pitching, talking about Year
Yeah.
Zero and Resistance, and Old
Yeah.
Ones, which is one of
That
yours.
was, yeah, it was a perfect timing, right? I think it was the week that they were launching that.
Yeah,
Yeah, wow, that's like it. I mean, it's kind of it's great and amazing that they've kept going, because that could have easily derailed an awful lot of different companies, right?
I do have to say, I mean, and I read the first two issues of your book, just thinking through like, man, the stuff that you guys have put out. I know you've
Yeah,
done Old Hunts and this in just a short period of time. You've
yeah.
become first publisher when people go into a store, they talk Marvel, they talk DC, they talk Image, and then they either say Boom or AWA. Like you've
Oh,
surpassed
cool.
being in 2 years in people and that you're ones that stores recommend. That's what
Right.
I think is
Okay.
cool. It's not about, hey, this hot new book is worth going to be $30 at the end of the day. It's like, no, you got to read the book. The book is
Yeah.
no, but it doesn't matter what book. You guys have been putting out some amazing books, like Old Hunts. I loved. I know you wrote that with
Ollie
Ollie.
Masters. Yeah, we co-wrote that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved. That was such a fascinating, and just we interviewed Lee, your colorist.
Leo, like, yeah, I mean, he did an amazing job on it, right? I mean, over Lawrence Campbell's work, but it's yeah, it's kind of, well, Out and Old Haunts are similar in as much that, well, in a lot of ways, really, they're 5 issue total.
Mm-hmm.
There's stories which are a start, a middle, and an end, and I think it's kind of so refreshing for me, anyway. In the, we know in the comics industry, stories roll along, right? You've got to keep this shit,
Mm-hmm.
you can't just end things. People never want them to end. It's kind of nice to do these stories which do have a natural end to them. I think there's something a lot more satisfying to that. And if they're popular enough, yeah, maybe we'll bring them back for sequels, but not necessarily. That might just be it.
One, like I really enjoyed. I've only read the first. I'm lucky enough to read issue two,
Right.
but I read issue one. I loved how issue one went, and that came out last week, October 6th, and I loved how it went. It was like, oh, I thought this was, because to be honest, looking at the cover, I was like, I don't like monster horror books, so this is not going to be for me.
Mm.
And then I read it, and I was like, oh wait, this is Steve McQueen and The Great Escape, and this is that semi-good, semi-bad, the Heart's War, Bruce Willis movie. Like I
Right.
love prison escape movies. Like I was like, oh, okay, I can get behind this. And then Will Conrad's art is just fabulous. Like
Yeah.
between the two of you, I'm curious. I'm gonna pull up some panels that you guys have released for issue one. Just so much is told without words. Like I
Yeah.
love how you did it. I'm sure you wrote into, hey, do this, but so much of the book is like, hey, I want to see this, and it's like, oh, it's blood going into a coffin, and what's going to happen, and it's all building up to. I sort of wish the covers hadn't been, because you had 3 exclusives that came out. I wish the covers
Yeah.
had not revealed what potentially could be in the book. Like if it hadn't, it'd been so much better for me.
No, I know what you mean. It's a really tough one, that, because I mean, without any spoilers, right? If anyone hasn't read it, the big surprise is meant to be at the end of issue one. You
Yeah.
turn the final page, I mean, there's no doubt what's happening now. It's something bad is happening to the prisoners, shall we say? And from a writer's point of view, you'd be more than happy to just let that be the surprise. You can't sell the book if you just go, it's
Yeah.
a prisoner of war book. Do you know what I mean? You kind of have to suggest there's something supernatural and horrible and toothy on the cover.
Yeah.
So, But I know, yeah, I know what you mean. You always feel conflicted with that type of stuff. You know, the writer part of you would be quite happy to let everything be a total surprise, and the person who needs to actually earn money for a living has got to actually sell the books a little, right?
That has to be a struggle because you've worked on with several different publishers. You've done Marvel, you've done DC, you've done Vertigo. So you've played the game. You've done little. I mean, what was your longest arc? Like, what series was your longest arc for the?
Suicide Squad for DC a few years ago. I did 50 issues, something in the region of 50 issues.
Whoa.
You know,
was that the New 52 version or Rebirth?
It was Rebirth. It was with Jim Lee, and it was we launched with Jim Lee, and it was just to coincide with the first movie coming out, the David Ayer's movie coming out. And then it was double shipping at the time, so it wasn't like 50 issues. To me still sounds like, oh, you were on that book for years, right? I think we were maybe 3 years, maybe something like that, maybe a little less, but a lot of it was 2 a month, which was just that's an interesting experience, put it that way. I had a full head of hair before I started doing.
I wish I could claim the same.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, we're all that's what, if you work in comics long enough, your hair falls out, right? So, so that's probably my longest run. But I mean, it's, again, going back to the thing of doing stories like I said earlier, with something like that, where you have to keep it rolling, you have to keep the subplots rolling, and over a long period of time. And it's just it's a breath of fresh air to tell stories in start, middle, and end, 5 issues and out, and you know, and also best will in the world. If you work for Marvel, you work for DC, whether you're writing Spider-Man, Superman, whoever it is, you cannot kill them off. Obviously, right? You can, but they'll be back. We all know they'll be back. And with books like Old Haunts and Out, one of the refreshing things is you create these new characters, and hopefully if you're doing your job, you make the audience really like them, and then you kill them, basically, which is not all of them, you know. But
I've latched on to one guy already. I mean, the guy you want everyone to latch onto, the Navajo translator. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I really like him, and I like him even better in issue 2. And then I'm like, crap, please don't be the one that, I mean, he appears to, of course, he's the, I like him as a character, and also like he's not your trope. Like you have the chiseled general who's the prisoner. We're going to escape, and this is how we're going to do it. And you got all those other characters, but then you have him who's like, we're bringing him in from a different type of story and dropping him in, and he's going to be the code breaker. And I love how you did that. Like, no, he can understand all languages, and this foreign language that no one's heard before, he can put it together. And you're just like, he's just smart.
Yeah. He's a savant with languages, basically, and he's a Comanche code breaker. I mean, those guys, they did come over in D-Day. They took about, I think from my research, they did about 17 of them came over, and the reason they came is because the Germans couldn't understand their language. They could break a lot of other languages, but they didn't know the kind of, you know. So I just thought it was an interesting. I think what you said is interesting. Where you said he's like a hero from another story, and I think he is because it's not only that his superpower. He hasn't got a superpower, but his superpower, shall we say, is languages, and he's adept at languages. He's a very smart man in the middle of a war. There's a line in the book I really like, which is at one point someone says the war is kind of the breakdown of communication, and all he's good at is communicating. But at the same time, he's also, as you find out as the story progresses, he's gay. Yeah. And you cannot be gay in 1944 in a prisoner of war camp. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so he's you know, obviously it goes without saying, his skin is a different color from everyone else. He's an outsider from the moment we meet him. So I just thought he was a really interesting protagonist and a lead character, not the type of lead character you see in a lot of books, basically, you know, which is always what you're kind of searching for, really.
So I'd read that he was gay or whatever, but at the same time, like in the first 2 issues, it doesn't really come across. Like it's not quite there yet. So that's 3 more issues to find that out. But at the same time, you revealed that early. Like you've told people to be prepared, which is that a choice of like instead of letting that be a surprise? Is that just? I mean, I know it's just a weird thing.
It's kind of it's a thing. I didn't really want it to be the hook of who he is, right? It's just that's just the nature of who the character is. And there's a kind of small hint at it in issue 1. There's a kind of friendship with another character, a character called McCallum. which will develop. But it was just more. Again, you're always trying to find things. You go, oh, well, I haven't seen that done very, and there were gay men in the forces in World War II, but it just,
I mean,
it's
not
a
like
lot.
it's a brand new thing.
Yeah, but it was very different in 1944
Mm-hmm.
than it is in 2021. I mean, so I just kind of thought, I don't know, from a basic point of view, I guess you're always trying to push characters in and put them under interesting pressures.
Yeah.
Because that reveals things about themselves. And I just thought, well, if you were a gay man in that scenario and you cannot allow that to be found out, I just thought that was an interesting thing, and I didn't think I'd seen that done elsewhere in a prisoner of war setting. Put it that way,
But it is interesting the timing of that story. You call your book out, which then obviously has double meanings or whatever.
Yeah.
At the same time, DC is like, hey, we're going to start making all of our characters and it's just like, that wasn't intentional. You don't write a story thinking that this is going to happen to another publisher at the same time. But
no, and weirdly, the title does. You're right; it does have a double meaning, but it was an inadvertent one. I had the title anyway because basically they just had to get out of the prisoner of war camp. Oh, they're going to die, right? They escape, or this creature that's in the prisoner of war camp with them is going to kill them off. And I think at one point it had a working title of Get Out, but then of course there was the
movie came out.
The movie, so I thought, well, I can't do that. But yeah, it's I guess it's kind of zeitgeisty to do. I mean, look at the news this week with with Jonathan Kent and everything, but that's it's part of who he is, but I don't think it's necessarily. It's not a book that is how to say this, that is going. This is the main thing about this book.
It's not
just an aspect of his character, basically, Yeah,
and I appreciate it when you're just like, it's no different than the guys sitting around talking about the girls they dated or who they're going back to see. This is just who he is. The big point of the book is to get out, to escape from this freaking scary looking castle, which, I mean, the art in it's just amazing. It helps tell the story so well. And then the creature, when you do get to see him, you're like, man, okay, I really want to figure out. And then issue 2, I'm just like, whoa, okay. I loved how issue 2 ended. Like, I don't want to reveal because that's 2 weeks down the road when that comes out. But that was the hook that had me hooked into the story. I'm like, okay, I want to keep reading. I mean, the same way Old Haunts, it started off and then it had this sort of weirdness, not bad weirdness, but just like, okay, issue 1 and 2 were just, and then, but I love when you choose artists that help tell your story and your words.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm sure did you choose Will or did Axel hook you guys up or?
Yeah, it was kind of a bit of both. I mean, I did an issue of Action Comics at DC with Will, so I knew he was fantastic. And but it was by chance. So Will was working on a book for AWA called Red Border. I'm terrible with names.
I read that one too.
yeah, sure, right. And so anyway, when we were talking with the AWA about Out, and I said, look, this is a book where it's a prisoner of war camp. Every character in it is dressed similarly, and they're all men, right? We need, whoever our artist is, we need someone who's really good at faces and characters, because we have to be able to, they're not wearing different costumes and stuff. You have to immediately know who everyone is.
Yeah.
And they said, well, look, Will's working for us, and Will's terrific. And I was like, I've worked with Will. He's great. So it was one of those things that came together. But I mean, what Will's done, as you know, just from issue 1, about sort of his reference for the castle, the Nazi uniforms, the vehicles and everything. It's just, he's done an amazing job on the book. It's a beautiful looking comic.
Who's the inker for that, or the colorist?
The colorist is Marco Lesko, who
like that combination is just, because the shades of like the uniforms, I'm like, okay, they're all the same, or prisoner uniforms, but they're not. There's slightly different colors on top of this, different hairstyles, and it's like, wow.
No, Marco did an absolutely beautiful. And they had worked together before, so Will's. I want Marco to color me, which is nice. I mean, it's like one of those things. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a create their own book, so it's not exactly the same with DC and Marvel, where you just get placed with people, and you very often you don't have any say in the matter, But with this, we got a chance to kind of make sure everyone was happy with each other and sort of work it up a bit more organically, But No, and it's also one of the other things to say about Will's work, which is like it's a very sort of filmic comic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like its references are very obviously Great Escape, Billy Wilder's Stalag 17, Where Eagles Dare. You know, effectively the castle is I don't know if you've ever seen Where Eagles Dare. It's the Clint Eastwood, Richard Burton film where they have to break into this, you know, castle up in the middle of the mountains. And Will does that, you know, can do that really, really well. He can make it look sort of very cinematic, which is, considering the language of a comic, that's what it needed.
And I appreciated the choices you make, like, okay, the different languages, like how you, I mean,
Yeah,
obviously you've written everything in English, but you would make the quick little in Czech, in Old Czech,
yeah,
in French, or you like you switch back and forth, which is what you'd have. And then not only was it set in Germany, it wasn't. It was set in Bavaria,
yeah,
which is, you have to actually know. I was like, I appreciate that little extra bit of history for
yeah,
people. Like, it's not Germany, it's Bavaria. It's the southern part of Germany, which is where these beautiful mountains and the Alps and
yeah.
the
So
castles.
that's what I was trying. Yeah, I was, when writing it, I'm there with maps and stuff, and I was making sure they didn't have to travel so far from the Czech border to get
Yeah.
the the creature, shall we say, you know, to the castle. And then yeah, I mean, I'm a big World War II history buff, which is part of why the story is set there anyway. But still, it was, in terms of the languages as well. You know, there are times when I get that sense of sort of a world breaking down. Is like, this is sort of like writer talk, but I thought it was interesting. Like in issue 1, a character, a Welsh character, just is shell shocked and panicked, and is just talking in his native Welsh, and we didn't translate that because what I wanted there is that everyone else on the truck at the time is going, what's he saying? Is he talking German? Is that German? And it's like, no, he's talking Welsh. And then in issue 2, which you've read, when the guards come from Nakona, they all talk to him. They're shouting at him in German. And again, there was a decision made not to translate those because that's got to be terrifying. Someone's talking to you in a language you don't, you're panicking anyway. And suddenly there's these, yeah. So yeah, there's a fair bit of Google Translate went into it.
What you guys accomplished, it was visually to the point where I understood without realizing. Like, amazingly, like when you're saying that, I'm like, I remember the scene. I remember it being written in a different language, but I understood completely what was going on.
Yeah.
And that was very helpful. Like, and it wasn't like you went back and did a flashback Zach Morris episode. Like, it was like, I like thinking through it because the way it read, I was like, so visually, like, you accomplished the exact same thing without the words, or you had the words, but just in there, whatever the native tongue was.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, with this, I mean, without, and we did the same with Old Haunts actually, is trying to make it cinematic in as much as laying off the dialogue, you know, not making it super duper dialogue heavy, you know, not using a lot of captions, not a lot of inner monologues from people. It's just what people say is kind of like that's, and then the visuals are telling their own story, as you say. But you can only do that if you have a really good artist. Unfortunately, we do.
So do you hand him, like when you're writing your script, and I've done enough of these interviews now to where talk to writers, talk to artists. Are you a writer that hands, here's my script. Okay, here's the words that I want on the page, but here's every square. I want you to draw something that looks like this. Like, do you spell it out, or do you trust Will?
No, I mean, you've got to trust. I sent a fair bit of reference photos of like the Nazi outfits, the uniforms, the trucks, and the guns and things like this. The script. I mean, I write full script. I don't write Marvel style, or plot style, whatever you want to call it. And I'm fairly, pretty specific in my visuals, and I will very often I don't do this necessarily on purpose to help the artist, just how I write. I will very often write what people are feeling in the panel descriptions, even if that's not coming across, that's in the dialogue. Do you know what I mean? I think it's important because what you're trying to do from an artist,
face to say it, or the color.
Yeah, exactly. And you're trying to get acting performances out of the characters, right? And the best artists can do that. And from a writer's point of view, the actual, when you hit that sweet spot is when you've got an artist who can sell acting performances, and then suddenly you're a better writer because then you can write subtext. You can have the dialogue say one thing and their face say something completely different. And that's the type of stuff that gets writers really excited. No one else might care, but writers are kind of like, oh, there you go, now we're going.
Which is because it is a big cast when you start the story
Yeah.
of 12, 15 prisoners plus the Germans plus the monks and
Yeah.
the vampire or whatever zombie and
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever, and uh, you have all of that built in, and you have these different people, and you're like, okay, who's important? But you had Will, and your subtext is there, like, okay, each one, you have the asshole, you have the everyone
Yeah.
has that the simple, but then you're like, now issue two, I'm gonna build more depth into each one of these characters, and the one
Yeah.
you might like might be the first one gone, and the one,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's what we're aiming for, yeah. And then there's certain sort of tropes in it. I mean, Cool Hand Luke is in there,
love them.
yeah, and so the character in it, Hara, who's the kind of the bully, like you said, the arsehole, he's George Kennedy effectively in Cool Hand Luke, and
Okay.
and then you've got Mike. Yeah, I mean his Weasley guy who's always hanging around with him. I was like thinking that's Michael C. Powell, who's in Cool Hand Luke and was in Bonnie and Clyde and those kind of movies, who always played little Weasley rat characters, So yeah, there are certain tropes where we're playing with, but you want with your main characters, you want to try and give them more depth, what I mean? And so, the Bronson character in it, he appears to be like when you first meet him, he's your typical Han Solo type. When you first meet Han Solo in Star Wars, right? He doesn't care. He's not going to help. He's really cynical and everything, but you just know there's a good heart in there somewhere, and we just need to try and unpeel the layers a bit.
I like that, like, and I mean, you're not saying, hey, I'm trying to create something new. You did, but you're telling where you pulled the things from, because when you write Marvel DC, there is no new. I mean, yes, you can try to create the new bad guy, but a lot of times that's okay. You tried really hard to create a new bad guy. I like the fact that you're saying, hey, I pulled from all these different movies and stories that I love, and I made this character, and now these are the side characters. Now your main character,
Nakona, yeah.
Nakona, I see more depth in him. Now I see a little bit of Windtalker, strictly because that's my point of reference for Navajo codebreakers or Comanche codebreakers or whatever. But it's not, there's just a little bit of that, like just strictly because Native American. I mean, that's the main reason you pull it. But
yeah.
I can already see him becoming, now I will be angry if issue 5 he is dead unless he sacrifices himself heroically or whatever. But like, I just like how you're building the characters, but also I like that it's nice to be able to read a book or read a story and already be able to place voices, like Cool Hand Luke voices. What we have here is a failure to communicate, and all those.
Yeah.
I can.
Well, I think what you try and do, I think, is you try and set up sort of archetypes. There are certain characters which are, even though it's a different character, like I said, I mean, the Bronson character, we know that archetype. We've seen Han Solo is an archetype. You know what I mean? He's the cool, dismissive, cynical guy who will come good at the end. And but then in the middle of that, you try and flip something, and try and do something new. Otherwise, it is just all you're doing. Otherwise, is just like ripping off old movies, which I am a bit. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with that a bit. But hopefully you put a character like Nakona in the middle of it, and that changes the entire thing and gives it a far more contemporary feel. And Nakona is kind of like, in a way, he's a 2021 character in a 1944 story. He's but which was just something I found interesting, because there are thematic things in there which are, even though it's the war and it's 1944, fascism is alive and well, unfortunately, in our world right now. And it has thematic resonance for my country right now, for your country, and it's and a lot of other places around the world. So a lot of the themes, they don't go away. It's not just a period piece. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's got something to say, I think, about today.
Now I'm like, I might have to go back and reread those 2 issues now that we've okay, I want to, and every time I talk to an artist or writer, like, there's things you miss when you just read through it, but like, to realize that some of the thought that you put into it, and you're not just throwing together a story just to make a buck or whatever. I mean, nice to make money. It's nice to sell copies. That's why you're doing interviews.
I want to be paid. Yeah.
But
definitely.
I just like, So you've done DC, you've done Vertigo. Is this your first with AWA? You did Old Haunts. Have you ever done
Yeah.
Image? Any other creative or own stuff?
I did, well, like I say, for Vertigo, I did a creator-owned book called Ordinary for Titan Comics, and then I've done a few. What else have I done? Well, for Vertigo, Vertigo kind of was creator-owned. I did a book called Unfollow,
Oh
which
yeah.
ran for 18 issues, and I did a book for Vertigo called The Royals, Masters of War as well, which was a creator-owned.
Okay.
And my first ever comic book was a book called Class War, which was creator owned as well,
Okay.
which was about 18, probably 19 years ago, something like that, maybe. Too
So
long ago.
I'm sort of hearing a theme. When they're creator owned, you have a certain idea of where you want to go with things.
Yeah, I mean, you
Classic.
do. I mean, it's like you know all too well with creator owned. It's kind of the part of the challenge, being horribly realistic and practical, is making a living at a creator owned, right? Because very often, if you want 100% creator ownership, there's not necessarily any money up front, and then artists find it really difficult to do that, even if as a writer you can write the script. So, but when you have an artist who's as good as someone like Will Conrad,
Yeah.
Will's not going to be able to draw that entire book with that level of detail and care, and unless someone's paying him a page rate somewhere down the line.
Oh, yeah. No, that's okay. That's just sorry. It's one of those, like, I had to pause and think, and I'm like, I love hearing about what you do as a writer, what you do as an artist, and different things of how comic books are put together. I mean, I think a lot of times we as readers don't realize, like, if we get to go to a con, which now the New York City just happened, and it's like everyone's all of a sudden cons are back, so it's so exciting. But still, you guys, when you go to cons, you don't really have time to talk about what you do unless you get to be on a panel, and then you get to share about what you've done for your latest book. But it's so much promotion. Like, I love getting a chance to talk to you one-on-one, or sometimes I have a buddy or two with me and we sit and talk to you guys and just sort of pick your brain on what gets you going. I love what you're doing with Out.
Thank you, man.
I'm curious, like, I know you got 3 more issues, but I'm assuming this is all written already. So what's the
next
pipeline?
What's the next thing? I've got a thing being announced. It might be being announced today. Which I can't talk about yet because, as far as I'm aware, it hasn't been announced. But I'm doing a new a mini series for a very well-known publisher and a very well-known in the world of a very, very well-known comics character, which is really exciting. But that's all I can say about it right now. And then I've been working for 2000 AD in the UK for years, and I write an awful lot of Judge Dredd.
Okay.
And I'm constantly doing that in one form or another. I sort of visit.
Did you not beg to be on Batman Who Laughs or whatever, since it was Judge Dredd?
I know. Well, that was very, very Judge Death, wasn't it? It was very, very Judge Death. It was, yeah, there was nothing to do with me. But no. And what else am I doing? I'm doing a bunch of TV, a few TV writing things these days as well. So, which is kind of interesting. But again, that's the type of thing you can be doing that and beavering away and working really hard and can't talk about it for years. So
I've talked to a few guys who are like, this book they can go, it sort of is optioned. I can't say any more than that. And then you're like, this has been 10 years. I've heard it's sort of been optioned. And then all of a sudden, like Brian K. Vaughan with Why the Last Man.
Yeah.
How long was that book optioned? And then it's like, oh, finally a trailer. Now I can really sell it.
Yeah. Well, I think that got optioned a few times, right? And it's there's a story I always like about that. There's the writer, creator of Judge Dredd is a guy called John Wagner, and he wrote a comic called A History of Violence, which was eventually made into a movie, right? But
Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah, David Cronenberg. And I remember, I don't know if it's apocryphal, but John Wagner saying he was really annoyed when the film finally got made because it meant that option checks were going to stop turning up every couple of years. So sometimes there's something to be said for just having your comic book optioned, and you get a
because they keep paying you to keep the rights to it for as long as
for like 2 years or something. So they'll give you a check for 2 years, which covers you for 2 years. I mean, if they want to keep it, they give you another check for like 2 more years or something. And then when they finally make the movie, I mean, if it turns into Star Wars, then you get a chance to go off and you buy your own island somewhere, and you're a very happy, wealthy person. But most films aren't Star Wars, and they come out and But that's the end of the option
I mean,
checks.
if Al gets optioned in or whatever, that'd be great and amazing. Your movie gets made, and you're like, crap, do I do an Out 2? And it ends up being like Blair Witch 2 and just this junk thing thrown together? Or
I would like to say that I would have too much the artistic integrity to do that, but I haven't at all. And if they offered me a big check, I would be doing Out 2 in a second. But being serious, I mean, if the story has to be, I am being serious, the story would have to be good, right? And I mean, that's the bottom line. You've got to have a story to tell. And it's like we've talked about with Old Haunts, that had a very definite kind of ending. But, we've had conversations about maybe there's more Old Haunts, you know what I mean? But, and it might be, but we'll see.
The British writer, Tanya French, I don't know if you've ever read her stuff.
No, sorry, I haven't.
She does murder mysteries or whatever, but she takes a random character that didn't matter.
Yep.
And the next story revolves around that person.
Yep.
And so, like, yes, you continue Old Haunts with only pulling that extra character that had parts in the story, but maybe not. So,
yeah, absolutely. And there is that sort of, I mean, Old Haunts, if people didn't read it, was, I mean, basically there's three gangsters and they're about to retire with the biggest deal of it. They're getting out of the life. And then the crimes of their past literally come to haunt them on one freaky night in Los Angeles. And so, that sort of just theme of just like people who've done bad things in the past, and you just think, hey, it's all working out for me. And then, the bodies that were buried, come back to life, basically. I mean, you could do that in any kind of story or genre, So, maybe we'll do more Old Haunts at some point. We'll see.
They're pretty cool. Rob, thank you so much for hanging out with me, talking your book. I'm excited to read the next 3 issues when they come out.
Thank you, man. Yeah, appreciate it. I'm really glad you like it. It's nice to hear.
Yeah, and I will say, like I told you before, I wasn't going to pick it up until we said we did an interview because the covers. I'm not a big horror guy, but the other side of it, and then the horror is awesome. Because it's not blood and guts and let me scare you. It's let me tell a story. I love stories, and that's the compliment to you because you've done a great job of telling a story and creating these characters, and then Will Conrad compliments what you're writing so well. So I'm excited to read the next 3 issues of that. So
okay, thank you, man. I really hope you like it. But thanks a lot for talking to me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'm dying just at the end of the interview. That'll be a dramatic end. But good to chat, man. Anyway, nice to meet you.
Thank you. See ya.
All right, cheers. Bye-bye.